Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. And we got a lot of great faces in the audience, which I'm sure we'll hear from in a moment. To this afternoon's agenda for our continuing budget hearings includes a presentation and conversation with the Youth Coordinating Board, and followed by the Municipal Building Commission, followed by Minneapolis Television Network, and concluding with our favorite park board, Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. So we'll be stacking those up for the afternoon. And this is a great opportunity to hear from what we refer to in the budget book as independent boards. So if my colleagues are looking for these particular budgets in the budget book, they won't find them, but they'll be described as independent boards and agencies in a separate tab in the budget book for that. So with that brief introduction, we look forward to our first presentation today, which is by Ann DeGroot with YCB. This is actually alphabet afternoon, YCB, MBC, MTN, and MPRB. So go ahead. Thank you, Mr. DeGroot, for joining us.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Ann DeGroot. I'm the Executive Director of the Minneapolis Youth Coordinating Board. And I'm happy to be here today to present to you our 2015 budget proposal. And before I get into the proposal, I wanted to give you a brief background of the Youth Coordinating Board because I'm not sure how familiar you are with us. We were founded in 1985 when Mayor Don Frazier was approached by Superintendent Richard Green and asked to help think through how the city could help the schools deal with the myriad of issues and problems that children were having in school at that time. And so Mayor Frazier and his staff came up with this idea of creating a joint powers board, bringing together the city of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, the Minneapolis Parks, and the Minneapolis Public Schools. At that time, it included the libraries as well, because they had an independent board, to really basically do a couple of things. One is to coordinate the efforts of the four major agencies to champion the well-being and healthy development of children and youth. And at the Youth Coordinating Board, we've always done that through collaborative action and policy alignment. So that is our major stock and trade. Our goal has been for the last several years to make Minneapolis the best city in the United States for children, young people, and their families to live in. And we think we can do that. We think it can happen. We've got all the bones here in Minneapolis for that, so we know that we can build on what we have already. In 2009, not long after I started at the Youth Coordinating Board, I attended a planning session that was facilitated by the CPED director at the time, Mike Christensen. And Mr. Christensen talked about 4 areas that would need attention in the city if the city was to grow. And one of those areas is to retain families with school-aged children in the city. Now, I heard that as a call to action for myself and the Youth Coordinating Board. And so I understood that to be the reason we existed for the city, is to help make that happen. So how can we create an environment, can we create programs and services in the city that allow for families to stay here with their children, to go to school, to go to the parks, to go to the library, to use our businesses and all of our services. So that has been my call to action since coming here. We organize our work around something we call a call to action, and the call to action has 4 goals in it that run the age range of 0 through 21. And those goals are that children enter kindergarten ready to be successful in school, that children graduate from high school on time, that children have access to quality, safe after-school experiences, and that children and young people are ready to further their potential through lifelong learning, work experiences, and community connections. Our request this year kind of comes in 2 pieces. The first is $306,000, which is really our request and the money that we've been allocated for a number of years now. That money goes into kind of 2 different things. One is the Minneapolis Youth Congress, which I'll talk about in a minute, And the second is something we call YMAP, which you won't see in your budget because that's not a technical name, but it stands for Youth in Minneapolis After School Programs. And let me start by talking a little bit about that first of all. I am really pleased today to introduce our partners in YMAP, just so that you can see. I thought it might be helpful for you to see some of the people we work with, and so they came today to be introduced. From the libraries, we work with Maureen Hartman over here, and from the parks, Heidi Pope, and I think Tony Walker from Minneapolis Community Ed is on his way as well. But these are our three partners in providing after-school activities for young people in Minneapolis. About half of the money that you allocate is redirected to them to help them provide those after-school activities. And I figured it out, and it turns into $5 per child who uses that service. So I think that's something good to know. We did a little research on in Ignite After School, which is the statewide after-school network. And at this point, Minnesota allocates about $10 per child who uses the services, and that's not very much, because if you're in Texas, it's about $70 per child. So we're looking at big picture after-school funding, not just here today, but how do we improve after-school funding? So our partners in those places do a great deal of work with young people and have had a lot of success over the years. They also work with us at the Youth Coordinating Board to develop our Minneapolis After School Network, which is something that you'll see a lot about in 2015. And this network is going to include a teen and parent program finder, which was branded by the Youth Congress and Target as What's Up 612, and that will go online very soon. You'll be able to find programs and activities for your young people. Our folks at the libraries, the parks, and the schools have been our testers. So they've helped us put this together, and we're grateful for that. We've also had input by parents and children, too, as well, in putting that together. But you're going to see a couple of other things in that regard this year. One is that we have developed a training collaborative, which is to help train youth workers to help develop quality after-school programs in Minneapolis. Many of them already are. Let's figure out where the gaps are. And then we also are working with Minneapolis Public Schools to collect and analyze data around after school so we can have a good understanding of what the impact of after school is.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Groot. Are you running a presentation?
We have one.
I wasn't sure. I've got a printed copy. I just wasn't sure if it was online. Obviously, it's not, so we're hoping we can.
Do I need to put any special password in? My own?
Yeah, your own work. That'll get you on, and then you can advance the slides. And while we're doing that little technical, I just wanted to introduce for folks in the audience, of course, I've been joined by Councilmember Cano, Andrew Johnson, Council Vice President Glidden, Councilmember Lene Palmisano, Long Yang, and Cam Gordon. Councilmember Gordon and Councilmember Palmisano are members of the Youth Coordinating Board as part of their council duties that they've raised their hand for.
We also
have
Did we break it?
I think we got it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Christensen. And we've also been joined by Councilmember Wasami, and we'll let you continue with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. I put up on the screen the numbers for the YMAP funds for 12 and 13, the number of young people who use the services that the funds provide. So you can see that there. I think they're very helpful. Now I'd like to talk about the Minneapolis Youth Congress. And the Youth Congress, of course, was established in 2007 by the YCB board. 3 of our staff at the Youth Congress are here today, including some of our coordinators who actually also play another role, so I'll introduce them later. But I'd like to introduce Pam McBride, who coordinates the Minneapolis Youth Congress, Evan Barnett, and Latoya Balagun, who are our lead youth workers for the Minneapolis Youth Congress. The Youth Congress is a representative body of young people who work to authentically represent young people to policymakers. And over the last several years, they've done a whole variety of things. We choose 60 young people from across the city every year to be part of the Minneapolis Youth Congress. They apply, they go through interviews, and they're then chosen. We train them, so we're in our training time right now for the Minneapolis Youth Congress. And then they join one of 7 committees, and those committees get to work, and they do a variety of different things. So, a couple of things that the Youth Congress has done over the last couple of years. One is that they've had a pretty significant role with the Minneapolis Health Department in looking at tobacco policies and staple food policies in the Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee, and have done some work with young people to talk about those things, and have in fact testified before that committee. In addition, they are the group who tested the go-to passes before Minneapolis Public School made them happen. So they spent 2 years testing those passes and writing reports every month on how they were working. And then those reports went to Met Council and to the public schools to put together their program. So those are just a sampling of things that they've done, but their committees meet regularly, and their committees talk about things like sex trafficking. They talk about things like behavior standards in schools. They talk about how young people can apply for jobs and work with young people about applying for jobs. So they do a variety of things that we're very happy about. They have a big event coming up that I'd like to invite you to. On November 6th, downstairs by the Father Waters statue, they're going to be sworn in. They get sworn in every year, and they get sworn in this year by Judge Margaret Daly, who's the presiding judge of juvenile court. And we'd love for you to join us if you're around. I think it's a very inspiring event, so please come if you're around. All right. Now, that is the $306,000 of YMAP money and how it's used. The second thing I'd like to talk about is some new funding that has been put into the mayor's budget for the Minneapolis downtown team. And just a little brief overview of the downtown team. Let me move you here. The downtown team was established 3 years ago, right after the bus passes were given out to the high school students in the Minneapolis public schools. There was a lot of concern about how was it going to be with a bunch of kids coming downtown in the day. So at the time, we suggested that one of the things that might be helpful is to put together a group of youth workers who can be downtown and really engage with young people. And some of those youth workers are here today, and I'd like to acknowledge them and some of our partners. Terrell Lewis is the project manager for this project and coordinates the team. Also here are some of our friends. Oh, good, Pam wrote me a note. Evan Barnett and Latoya Balagun, who you already met, are also part of that team. James Everett, part of the team. John L. Holman, part of the team. Amjad Youssef, part of the team. Did I get it? Okay. This is our team. We actually have about a dozen people on the team, and they go out, not every day, I think they go out 5 days a week right now, and engage with young people downtown. Now, what is kind of exciting about this is that the downtown team is a good example of what the YCB is, because we saw a need, saw a problem, we figured out a way to kind of solve it, And we called on some partners to help us do that. In the first year, we called on Minneapolis Public Schools, who helped to fund it the first year. But because it was such a good success, we were very happy to get help from the Downtown Improvement District, and Shane Zahn is here, Downtown Improvement District. He is one of our partners. Additionally, the First Precinct has been a great partner, and I think you all know Inspector Arredondo, who's one of our partners as well in the downtown teamwork. So these folks have come together, youth workers, government, business representatives, to work together to try to make our downtown the best downtown that it can be. And I have contended that cities are often judged by their downtown areas. And if our downtown area doesn't look like the best place for kids, young people, and their families, we got a problem. So let's really make our young people work, and our downtown work for our young people, and for our business leaders, and for all the people who are down here, and that's what they do. We did some surveying of young people, and we said to them, so why do you come downtown? Because when we started doing this, the major question I got from people was, why do they come down here? Why do kids come downtown? And the main reason they come is to transfer, because they're taking the bus or the light rail home. But they also come down here because their friends are here, and this is where they meet them to go somewhere else and do something. They also come down here because they want to go to the library. That should be a good thing to know. But you can see on this chart, and I think you all have it, about why young people come down here. Let me say a couple of other things about downtown. They come downtown because it's safe. There are a lot of other places that aren't as safe. They come downtown because stuff's going on downtown. We make an exciting, vibrant downtown. They want to be a part of it too. But what we need to make sure is that everybody's interests downtown are protected and cared for. And we feel very strongly that our downtown team helps to do that. You can see the outreach mission that they've stated, which is to interrupt the behavior cycle for youth who are disruptive or disengaged downtown by connecting them to meaningful activities or resources. And you see the summer crime report from 2013, 42% decrease in juvenile crime. This was the second year that our downtown team was downtown. 8% decrease for overall violent crime and 11% decrease for late night violent crime. Now from this year, June 1st through September 1st, aggravated assault, 10 to 17-year-olds, is down 100%. Auto theft down 100%. Arrests of juveniles down 2.52%. In the 18 to 24-year range, which we don't really focus on, but I think us being down here has an effect, we have robberies, 29.4% decrease, violent crime, 1.1% decrease, traffic and motor vehicle violations, 33% decrease, and arrests, 25% decrease. So we think that there are some really good results that we can see from having our downtown team in place.
There are terrific results. And, I just wanted, there's a pretty good request.
Someone sent this to me. Someone sent this to me today, Mr. Chair, and I thought maybe he wanted it in the stack. So
I'm glad to make the presentation. That's kind of exciting.
It's a great picture. So those are great numbers. We're very proud of them. And at this point, the Downtown Improvement District funds some of our work. We fund some of our work. This will help us expand our work a bit. We think it's a really good strategy overall in the city for working with our young people.
Okay. Let me just interrupt one more thought here. We do have a question or comment from Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think, certainly it's very impressive the work that's being done. I greatly appreciate it. I think you add a ton of value. I just want to clarify with 100%, you said 100% reduction in auto theft. Is that correct?
I'm going to ask Inspector Arredondo to answer this question.
And I would say if it's 100%, does that mean we've eliminated it?
Council Chair, Quincy, council members. Councilmember Johnson, to your question, from the same time frame of this summer, from June 1st to September 1st, that was a 100% reduction in aggravated assaults with the category of juveniles, the 10 to 17-year-olds. So 2013, last year at this same time, there were 6 reported aggravated assaults. During that same time frame for this summer, there were none reported.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want you to know that this is a national model, and we've had people from around the country come and look at what we're doing.
Thank you. One of the things, of course, that YCB and the Youth Congress has been very involved in, especially Shane sitting there, Inspector is with us. You've been a part of our Nicollet Mall Livability Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Downtown Council. This is really a committee representing residents, employers, property owners, police, Metro Transit police are in there, as well as elected leaders. And we're really trying to shape what do we want Nicollet to look like as we're in this prospect of developing a whole new vision for downtown Nicollet Mall specifically. And one of the areas that was identified that we wanted to work on was about youth behavior. And really what we learned through the presentations that you've presented and the coordination with the DID, kids want to come downtown for the same reason everybody wants to come downtown. But there's different expectations from people who visit Minneapolis or work downtown that they don't understand what's happening. So this was a terrific opportunity for you to say, here's all the things that we're already addressing, and here's the results that we're already getting. And it's through interventions, it's through this downtown outreach team that the youth workers are really intervening and helping kids navigate that process. I also wanted to point out, you talked about the go-to passes. You also were really involved in the education of young people on how to use those passes. And what is your conduct on a bus, on a LRT? This is an important facilitation role that you're playing, but it's also an education role, and it's also a career development role for the people who get to take part in this. So just wanted to highlight those two aspects that I've been involved with. Also on our youth cabinet, you've been a vocal participant in our youth cabinet, which of course is a city department structure, putting a youth lens on everything we do. But I always use the Youth Congress's little tagline of no decisions about us without us. And so it's great to have you involved in that process as we're shaping our city and how our departments work together to address our needs of our youth.
Councilmember Quincy, if I may say something about behavior, the downtown team, along with the First Precinct and the Downtown Improvement District, developed a sheet for kids about behavior downtown that they use. But I have to say the kids are more strict with each other. If you ask young people to help participate in behavior standards, they will, and they're relatively strict, frankly. So one of the things our team has been able to do is really to talk to young people about behavior downtown. And then you hear the kids talking to each other about it. And it's a way of really appreciating and valuing their lives and their input in this. They want a good downtown too. They don't want problems. So we rely on our young people quite a bit, both through the Youth Congress and just in all of our work, to help us work with young people. They're the ones who know.
Thank you very much. Were there any other questions or comments? Councilmember Glidden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple follow-up questions on the downtown team, and then I had a couple comments on the Youth Congress stuff.
Did you change slides? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I thought at some point I was going to get on him. Okay.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, very interesting presentation on the Minneapolis downtown team. Actually, I wasn't familiar with this project, so it was really great to get some information about it. Is this the first year of the downtown team, or have you utilized the downtown team in a previous year?
Councilmember Glidden, this is the third year.
This is the third year, okay. So, because I see in the mayor's budget, she now has designated it's an ongoing funding stream for the downtown team, so.
Yes, and Councilmember Glidden, to be clear, this is the first year we've come for funding. We've operated this is our third year operating, but we're asking for funding for next year, which is our fourth year.
Yeah, no, I understood that. This is the first year we've seen an enhancement in the budget for this project.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So, and then I was just kind of curious, so the downtown team, if I'm reading this right, they're acting primarily as kind of connectors, and so they're engaging with young people on the street and then helping connect them, or are they also creating programming?
It's primarily connecting, although in order to, I think, do a good job, a lot of times we're figuring out about what kinds of programs can we direct young people to. So, for example, the YMCA has, in the last couple of years, opened up their doors, so it's a place young people could go that they didn't have before. Okay. We also worked with the parks and the Minneapolis Health Department on a pop-up park during the All-Star Game. So there is an element of that, but it's primarily a connecting role with the young people. And let me also say, Councilmember Glidden, that our youth workers work a lot with the adults downtown as well. So they're connected to the radio network of the security folks downtown. They sit in on roll call with the police. And so some of their work is really working with adults to help sort of figure out how to best manage young people downtown.
Okay. Well, anyway, it was a nice presentation of that work, and clearly some good results with young people and crime downtown, and so I hope that was a nice result of the connections and the work being done. I would just say maybe another note is I thought that was really interesting information that you put together from asking questions of young people downtown, and I think there's a lot of perceptions and stereotypes about young people downtown, and I just wonder if there are other projects in the works or other ways you might think of how we break down some of those stereotypes. And the other thing that often is discussed, and I know is a big issue, is just the relationship with the police department, and so having the police department be a partner to this work is, I think, really fruitful, but I just want to put those two things on the table. So
yes, Councilmember Glidden, two things about that. One is the first precinct has been great to work with, the leadership of the first precinct, and you need to know that the Downtown Improvement District, we couldn't do this without those two groups. They've made a big difference here. But the sheet you see, that one sheet with the colorful graph bar lines, we have a whole report of other things young people were asked that I'm happy to share with you. I didn't really think you wanted me to go through 15 pages, but we do have a good report on that. And this January, we're going to be coming out with our report card, and this time our report card is going to really focus on what young people say about their lives in Minneapolis, supported by data. So that, I really, really like and appreciate what you're saying about needing to break down the stereotypes. And I think that's an important role for us. And I'm hoping with those two things we can do that.
okay, thank you. And then I just wanted to say for the Youth Congress, I was one of the members of the committee where some of the folks came to testify, and they left, or they had to leave. They were there. It was a really long hearing, but they had to leave before we actually got to make some comments, and just want to let them know that they were acknowledged and thanked for being there and engaging on that topic. They did a great job. And I thought another topic that the Youth Congress had engaged in was sex trafficking. I just didn't see that mentioned here, and I just say that because there's some stuff coming up we might want to work together on, and so thank you for all the work with the Youth Congress as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Glidden. And yes, they did work on sex trafficking, and they did several community conversations with young people around sex trafficking. And to our knowledge, this is the only report by young people about young people's experiences regarding sex trafficking. And I know it was presented to the city and county committees, or you've talked to them, and we've now been talking to the folks doing this work around the state to try to integrate it into some of the protocols that are being developed.
Thank you. I don't know that we actually saw the report though, so if there's a follow-up or final report that was done, I would just recommend you send that so that some of the folks who were on that policymaking committee can see it, and that would be, I think, really helpful.
We'll see that you get that. Thank you.
Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Griffith, first off, thank you very much for your work. And oftentimes downtown, the dynamic that you have is that when something negative happens, it gets the publicity. However, when things are going right, we don't. And I know that you, along with Shane and the DID and Inspector Arredondo, who I talk with, I feel like on almost a daily basis, you've been working very hard. And there have been really nice statistics coming from that, and I appreciate it. A couple of quick questions. First is Summer Crime Report 2013. That is accurate. This is 2013. That's not 2014?
That is 2013. I have
Okay.
just got 2014 numbers.
You did just get them?
Yes.
Okay, and that's what Councilmember Glidden was just asking about.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I would love to see those as well. The numbers that you were verbally going over with the 100% decrease, that was a 2014 number?
Correct.
Gosh, that's really great. That's really impressive. I would love to highlight that. I think that would be a wonderful story that we can publicize with as much negative attention as you get. You know, it's frustrating because you go 2-3 months with nothing that happens bad downtown, and then next thing you know, there's a shooting, and it's like the previous 2 to 3 months have been erased in people's minds. So I would like to see that. Additionally, I, along with a couple other council members from the area, were working to really find some good recreation space in addition to the Y downtown, which I know would help in terms of programming. And then my only final ask is if you could just turn to the next slide on the docket real quick. I just had, that would be great.
That one,
Yeah,
Councilmember?
no further questions.
Oh,
Councilmember Gordon, you have the last word.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that as one of the council reps on the Youth Coordinating Board, that I really think that the Youth Coordinating Board is probably working better than it ever has before. I think it's just fantastic, and we are definitely, I think, getting our money's worth. I think that we're seeing the city play a bigger role in kind of helping coordinate efforts there, and the fact that we have such good participation from the parks, the county, the schools, and others at the table is really significant. I think the Youth Congress is also really coming into its own. I think this is maybe last year's the first year where we've really seen connections kind of bearing fruit in terms of city policy and influence that are coming, and I just think that's fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to it playing a more of a leadership role in coordinating after-school activities too. And I think with this, the new web-based system of registering your programs and then registering yourself or your children in the programs we're gonna be a model for other cities. I think even St. Paul will even start looking to us. I think we're kind of catching up right now to St. Paul's efforts, and we're learning from them, but I think this is significant. So I'm really delighted with the work and very supportive.
thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Just one last thing. Could you please go back to that previous slide?
So we can finish this presentation, which is in everybody's best interest. Thank you very much, Mr. Groot, and all the folks at YCB and Youth Congress for joining us, as well as the inspector and Shane from DID.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you so much. It's great to talk to you.
Well, I hope Ms. Delaney has an equally entertaining presentation. And we'll allow for a few moments here as we transition to the next topic, which would be the Municipal Building Commission. Welcome, Ms. Delaney. Please join us and we'll begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Quincy, City Council members. My name is Erin Delaney, and I serve as the Director of the Municipal Building Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this afternoon. This is an organizational chart of the agency. You can see from the top that I report to the MBC board, which is comprised of 4 board members. The chair of the Hennepin County Board and 1 appointed Hennepin County Commissioner serve from the county. That's currently Mike Opat and Peter McLaughlin. The City of Minneapolis representatives are Council President Johnson and Mayor Hodges. And that again is as per state statute. We have a complement of 55 full-time positions, and we are charged by that same state statute to take care of the City Hall Courthouse building. That includes care and custody of the building. That includes all operating and capital projects, as well as space assignments and reassignments. I'm going to change the order a little bit. I wanted to just address how we feel that the MBC supports the city's priority areas. We believe we support helping the city run well. We present a clean and safe City Hall building, and we believe that that represents a safe and well-run city. We feel people have a positive experience, physical experience, if you will, when they come into a safe and clean building. In addition, the improving equity goal of the city. City Hall is an open and accessible building that promotes equality to all citizens. We are available as a public forum. We include multilingual signage. We have monthly tours, and all of our spaces are ADA compliant. And lastly, growing the city. We feel that the MBC contributes to this priority as well. Oftentimes we have visitors that come into the building. This is possibly their first exposure to downtown Minneapolis, and we feel if they have a positive experience in our building, that transfers out into other areas of downtown Minneapolis. I have a note down here that we do have our catering and events program, which we'll talk about in a moment. 25 events this year, and oftentimes I literally do hear people say that they never knew that that's what was inside this building. So it's a positive experience for the city. Going back one page, this is our recommended, this is our budget request for 2015. You can see we have 5 program areas: administration, custodial and security staff. The MBC supplies all the custodial and security staff for this building. So it's MBC staff that are cleaning the carpets and vacuuming your offices. In addition, the security staff at the 4th Street entrance, that's MBC staff. We also partner with Hennepin County Security to supply additional security for the building. The repairs and improvements department of the MBC is primarily comprised of building trade staff, painters, carpenters, plumbers. Those are all MBC staff who service all the tenants and the public in this building. In addition, there's an adult detention center department, and that serves the Hennepin County Adult Detention Center, which, as you know, is on the 4th and 5th floor of this building. And that program is funded exclusively by Hennepin County. And then our final program is the Work for Others department, and what that is used for is when tenants make requests that they pay for. These requests fall out of the regular repair and maintenance that the MBC provides. So these would be office remodelings, new carpet, new furniture, any type of that work is billed through this department because it's paid for by the tenant in their budgets. So there's additional details on all the departments. And then how is the MBC doing? Well, we think the MBC is doing very well. We are the project manager for the mechanical life safety project that is going throughout the City Hall Courthouse building. This project encompasses both life safety, mechanical, and HVAC upgrades. There are a total of 23 stages to the program. It started in the year 2001. And currently we project that we will be completed with this entire program in 2021. We have 6 stages that remain. We're currently working on the ground floor, which was previously 1C licensing. That's our project. And we have documented improvement in air quality, stabilized temperatures, and a significant decrease in energy consumption, which we're extremely proud of. And as the more and more stages are completed, we feel that that consumption will continue to decrease. Another program we're proud of at the Building Commission is our catering and events program. You probably have seen the setup on the weekends, weddings and or office events, receptions, parties. We've held 25 events so far in this year, and we have 2 more events. We, through rentals and commissions, have collected almost $95,000, which goes into a historic preservation fund, which is used exclusively to fund historic preservation projects in our building. In addition, we do provide monthly tours, which we typically have at least 10 members of the public plus for each tour. And we're also available to provide tours for any special events or guests that are in the building. Just some budget highlights. Again, the operating budget for the building commission is split 60% city, 40% Hennepin County. The proposed 2015 budget is actually 1% lower, and we feel that the agency can continue to provide the same level of service. There's a breakdown of our property tax targets. And again, the county is responsible for 100% of the detention center. And this note on the bottom about the work for others, that's the cost department where departments pay for their own office remodeling. That's not paid for out of operating dollars from the agency. This is a breakdown of our expenses again. I also thought it would be interesting just to briefly note the capital projects that the agency is involved in. The MBC participates in both the CLIC project and the county's CBTF capital funding projects. The first two, in the life safety and the mechanical, that's the stage-long project that I referenced earlier. And then the third project, which you'll be seeing a lot more of in 2015, our plan is to replace the current freight elevator with a new, more usable, larger, new freight elevator, and in turn, convert the current freight elevator into an additional passenger elevator, which will be used almost exclusively by the MECC. They, quite frankly, need another more direct route to their offices. The freight elevator is as you come in the 5th Street doors, you go to your left, it's not very aesthetically pleasing, but we need to convert that existing freight elevator into another passenger elevator.
And I'm sorry, what would that serve again?
The MECC department, it will be open for public use, but we primarily see a need for that department to have that. Yes.
That's the R911, et cetera.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. Minneapolis.
you.
Yes. Some critical power project. That's a new project we're getting started. We need to start with a comprehensive study on what needs to be on critical power, and then also an exterior repairs project too.
Excuse me, Mr. Delaney. Councilmember Gordon, please.
I just had a question about elevators. So if we are changing the freight elevator to a passenger elevator, where are we going to be putting the new freight elevator?
The new freight elevator, Councilmember Chair Quincy, is we've been working on this for several years. We've already installed the hoistway. If you come in the entrance on the 5th Street side, you're coming in off the steps into the building. It's almost straight ahead. Obviously, there's the stairs going up, but if you go right to the right, you'll see a carved out area. That is where the new freight elevator will be located. It will be larger, much more usable for all the construction projects, quite frankly, that have been going on in the building. You'll notice with our mechanical project, oftentimes the cost is driven up because contractors have to use exterior windows and makeshift ways to bring up equipment and take out waste. So we hope that this new freight elevator will help in those projects.
And then we'll have 2 passenger elevators that don't go down into the sub-basement. And then we'll have one other, this is all on 5th Street, and then there'll be one other passenger elevator that does go all the way down. Is that, will the new one go?
Yes, it will. The
Fifth
old
Street.
freight new passenger will have access to the sub-basement and the basement levels. The new freight elevator, which hasn't been used yet, will have just key access. That won't be open and available for passengers.
Right. But that freight elevator presumably will also go all the way down to the sub-basement?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yes, council member.
Thank you.
That concludes my remarks about the building commission. I'm happy to address questions or comments.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any. So I will thank you very much for your presentation. And I don't think we'll see you again until next year.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is, I think, scheduled for 2 o'clock, so we're running a little bit early. MTN. I'm just going to pause here. Matt, are you doing the presentation for MTN? Is Mr. Fallon going to be here soon? Okay. Well, why don't we take a moment to have a brief break, and we'll get back here at 1:55. See if we can begin 5 minutes early. Okay. We'll be able to continue our presentation this afternoon. The next presentation that we'll be discussing is the Minneapolis Television Network. We'll be joined by their executive director, Michael Fallon. And I just want to remind members that we're on speaker management if you'd like to use that, if you have your computers available. Otherwise, just get our attention with the red tags. Mr. Fallon, welcome. Begin at your leisure.
Thank you, Chair Quincy and distinguished council members. So my name is Michael Fallon. I'm the executive director of the Minneapolis Television Network, also known as MTN. Here to discuss our budget today. The amount in the mayor's budget for 2015 from the general fund to fund our services is $472,496. We have 9 full-time equivalents. We work with a number of freelancers too that fluctuates, but that's hard to include in this assessment. The program funding for MTN provides public access television services for the city of Minneapolis. We believe that what we do is we offer diverse residents of Minneapolis the tools to and activities to engage with the rest of the community through the media. And ultimately what we strive to do is help build a vibrant democracy in which we all share with the region's social, cultural, and economic vitality. Of the goals and values of the One Minneapolis, we believe that we help provide equity by giving voice to diverse members of our community. We have a fluctuating membership of about 300 community producers. and somewhere just over 50% usually are people who are of color, non-white identifying members. Our youth programs serve even more diverse residents of Minneapolis. 78 in the last year identified as non-white, 78%. And on our channels on the Comcast network, channel 16, 17, and 75, we broadcast programming in 5 different languages. We also believe we add to Minneapolis's overall vitality. We did a major survey of our membership and community this past year and had 101 current members surveyed. 91% highly valued the accessibility that we offer to the media through our services. So just to go with the goals that the city has put forward, these are what we believe we achieve through our services. Equity by giving voice to diverse populations in the city. Vitality by giving people access to express themselves to the community. And connectedness, people connect with each other through the media. Just a little bit of information here. In 2013, the last full year that we have numbers for, the number of actual individual programs that ran at MTN were 3,061. So it's more than 200 community-based programs per month. Programs that were actually produced at our studios at MTN, which is located in St. Anthony, Maine, across the river. 1,491 actual programs produced there. And over 1,000 programs produced around the Twin Cities by community members, sometimes in their own homes, sometimes in their own studios. And the foreign language shows that were produced at MTN or shown at MTN, where there were 250 different shows in those 5 languages that I mentioned. As to how we're doing, we're continuing to grow and develop and change with the times. In particular, we're focused on youth programs and offering services and educational programs to youth. We focus on job skills now, giving young people an opportunity to actually have some pre-professional experience in the media. And again, these are 78% kids of color, 75% low-income kids. We believe that we focus on giving them some job skills, some job training, some community leadership skills, and we focus on social justice. Of the 197 youths we work with in 2013, 73% of them received a full package of training in the media. In other words, they were able to come out of our programs and be able to produce something on their own in media. And we actually had 22 of them were paid to do work in some form, some part-time work over the course of the year. We also, through MTN, we have a vibrant and diverse slate of community productions. Again, this over 200 individual shows produced and shown on our channels every month. And we work with a variety of community partners. And last year some of the new partners we work with, the Minneapolis Department of Health, the Indian Health Board, Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, and the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. We've also been launching an initiative to outreach to the younger generation, the young people in their 20s and 30s. So we've developed a number of events. One we call Pop-Up TV. It's a catch-all for different kinds of things that we do. And we've seen some results bringing in younger people, an expansion of the number of young 20-something members. Also, just if you look at our social media numbers, since this past May, our Twitter followers are up by 54%, and our Facebook following is up by 15%. We have nearly 2,000 Facebook followers. In terms of our budget, We're still adjusting from reductions in our allotments that happened a few years ago. We're still trying to right size and have our budget be stabilized. The proposed budget for 2015 has an overall reduction in revenue of 7%, and a corresponding reduction in expenses of 7%. Just to point out a few highlights, specific items from that changing budget situation. On the revenue side, our reduced revenue projections sort of reflect our current understanding of current conditions. Fundraising is difficult, so we've downscaled some of our fundraising goals. And also last year, for 2013, we asked for a budget enhancement from the budget proposed by the mayor, and we asked for enhancement to help pay for some equipment that we needed. We were very lucky to get that enhancement and very grateful, because the equipment that we finally bought, the previous equipment exploded a week before we were ready to set it up. So we had the equipment ready to go, it just died right before we were ready to set it up.
Mr. Fallon, if I could just interrupt a moment. Before I get to the question, you just mentioned about the additional revenues that were, or income that was provided to you last year as part of the 14 budget, is that correct?
Yes.
Was that part of the adopted budget, Ms. Christensen, or was that a one-time enhancement that wasn't part of the adopted budget?
As I recall, the addition to the budget was provided for through the CARS program, and so it was a one-time addition to the budget.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councilmember Johnson had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this might be a question for Sandy as well. Is the entirety of revenue for MTN coming from the franchise agreement fees that we collect, and is that a requirement within the franchise agreement?
Chair Quincy, Councilmember Johnson, I am not well acquainted with the requirements of the PEG fees, which I believe you're referring to. I believe in large part that is the sole source for the funding that goes to MTN, if not for some of these one-time enhancements for particular use.
Great, thank you.
If you could, Mr. Fallon, maybe go back a slide so we can catch up on that revenue and expense summary sheet before you get into the detail. Looks like 89% of the general revenue is from the city of Minneapolis, and that's what Ms. Christensen just alluded to. Those are the PEG fees associated with the franchise agreement, and that with all of the other grants, donations, sponsorships, events, et cetera, as well as the earned revenue, it looks like still 75% of the entire revenue picture comes from the city through those PEG fees. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Okay. And then the operating costs, that's off significantly, which is probably good cost control, I'm hoping, but I'm sure that's going to be in your future slides. So I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to highlight it on the spreadsheet before we got into the details.
Yes. So you can see that between the city of Minneapolis contribution to MTN from 2014 to 2015 is down by $25,000. That was that one-time enhancement. It was $25,000 to buy a playback server. Our plan in 2015 is to focus more and to hone in on fundraising opportunities, events, having built some steam in terms of outreach in our outreach program. We hope to realize more revenue in that area. We continue to develop our production services and connect with partners in the community. And we hope to build more capacity to do more productions around the city. And we're just going to continue our outreach and marketing plan to bring in new members who can make use of our services. Regarding the expenses, we're totally dedicated to keeping up our level of services. Everyone on staff works at high capacity. Our staff is down by about a third since our height a few years ago. But everyone is very dedicated to the mission of MTN, and most of our expense reductions, the 7% expense reductions, have to do with, again, freezing sort of our expenses, our expenses that we can freeze. Our wages will not be growing this year, and we will have no staff development money or anything like that. We also have a freeze on equipment purchases and upgrades until we realize more revenue and grow our services. And then a large part of this reduction in expenses for the year have to do with a planned move to a new space that is more cost effective. This is something that is in the works right now. And we're hoping that what we will realize over the next 5 years is a continued efficiency in our expenses, and then we can come back to the things that we need to fund.
What's the status of the studio move?
We are about to sign a lease agreement.
We have to.
Yes, we have to meet with our board. It's been in negotiation for a number of months. A lot of research, a lot of due diligence. And we are also in the process of lining up some funding sources to help pay for a build out, because that's always been the largest challenge with a new space where we have a mixed use with television studios and office space. So we found a space that is very affordable right in the heart of Northeast Minneapolis, right off of in a business district. Very accessible, beautiful space, functional space, but it still costs us. It's going to cost us about a couple $100,000 to build it out, but that's where we're at right now. And that's been the negotiation, and that's been ongoing.
And should the lease be signed, when do you think that move might occur?
We will take, if everything goes as planned, we will take ownership on February 1st, and then have a process of moving in over a few months. We also have to break our current lease, so we'll have a little bit of overlap, which will cut into our savings for the year. But we're looking at realizing savings in the next 5 years that will make a huge difference on sort of giving us opportunity to grow and develop new programs, and to keep everyone's salary growing, and do staff development and all those kinds of things, and of course upgrade our equipment.
Great. Thank you.
That's all I have. Open to any questions, other questions you may have.
Thank you all. Are there any further questions from the council? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for your presentation and for the MTN partnership that has lasted. How long have we been?
This is our 31st year.
31st year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Quincy and council members. Thank you.
I think we are going to have to wait a few more minutes for the park board representation to join us for the last presentation. So they're scheduled to start at 2:30. So we'll continue to take a break until they're arrived. Good afternoon, folks. We're about ready to reconvene, so I just wanted to give council members a heads up that we're about to begin, and we're all, of course, using speaker management so if you could log into that, that would be helpful. Our next presentation is from Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. We're happy to be joined by President Liz Walensky from the Park Board. Thank you for joining us, Ms. President. And of course, Superintendent Jane Miller will be offering the presentation today. So we are ready to begin whenever you are.
Council members, thank you. I'm pleased to be here this afternoon, actually, it's not evening, to present to you my recommended 2015 budget. Can I turn this? So what I'm going to do this afternoon is walk you through the foundation of the budget that's built that I presented to the board last Wednesday and that our board will be considering over the next 2 months. As you all know, the direction the board gave me was to build a general fund operating budget with a 4% property tax levy increase. Really, it's based on implications of both federal and state legislation that's impacted us financially, our increasing levels of park usage, and increasing demands for enhanced services and programs. We also have budgeted for year 2 of an 8-year urban tree canopy plan that has a 0.9% property tax levy increase for the tree preservation and reforestation levy to address emerald ash borer and tree loss due to severe storms that we've been having occur here. The key factors around our 2015 budget really are both financial and service challenges. In park maintenance, we've made significant operational improvements. However, we still have inadequate funding for general maintenance. We are also needing to identify standard service levels for park maintenance and areas of focus. Within recreation centers and programs and youth development services, again, we've made a number of operational improvements. However, we still don't have enough adequate resources to provide quality recreation services, particularly youth services. And our center administration level needs assessment are currently underway. Our other operating budget reductions, there were a number actually that we believe went too far. We have 19% fewer employees today than we did in 2003. And my budget is going to recommend some staffing increases just to meet basic operational needs, particularly in communications and marketing, customer service, human resources, park maintenance, and police. The main factors that are impacting our 2015 budget are continued cost increases. I know that the city is also facing healthcare cost increases. The Affordable Care Act has significant impact for all park and recreation agencies around the country, given the number of part-time and seasonal employees that park systems have. We also have factored inflationary increases, especially in construction costs, which have gone up dramatically in the last 9 months. Also minimum wage increases as well as employer pension cost increases. As you all know, emerald ash borer hit the city really significantly 2 years ago, and we've also had a number of more significant storms that have impacted our tree canopy in the city, both in parks and boulevard trees. Our capital needs continue to outpace the available funding we have for them. We have needs to make investments in our operation facilities. We have also have been making adjustments in the last 4 years around equipment and technology, which are internal service funds at the Park Board, and the fact that we have not kept pace with the needs in either equipment or technology, so we have internal rate increases. And we have also our enterprise fund. The last several years, we have been trying to align our funds and activities within our funds correctly. And so our enterprise funds, we are discontinuing support of general fund activities within the enterprise fund. And obviously, the increased demands for service and increased park usage has also impacted our 2015 budget. So the basis of our budget is to support the board-approved comprehensive plan that goes through 2020, as well as 2014 to 2018 strategic directions that this board adopted earlier in this year. We are also focusing on continuing to improve our internal coordination, enhancing our customer service response times, continuing to expand and enhance customer service, continue our work on equity, including racial equity, continuing to address staff capacity issues. minimize our impact on the environment, and obviously to continue to respond to threats to our tree canopy through a special tax levy. We have a number of performance initiatives that we're continuing to do. Our focus always is on excellent customer service and maintaining the system we have within available resources. From 2012 through 2014, we've done a lot of work to enhance our work performance and become more efficient in how we operate. Specifically, some of the most significant areas that we've made improvements are in forestry, where we've improved safety for our employees. We've become more efficient, and we've actually been able to increase our capacity while reducing our cost. Many of the same things in how we handle trash. We've improved our distribution of our maintenance employees. We've optimized our equipment and really done a lot of work around operational alignment and organization-wide reorganization. Some of these savings have really resulted, improvements have resulted actually in $2.3 million in annual operating budget savings because of the work we've done. And I believe we have a more cohesive operations, improved internal coordination, and improved service delivery. We still have more work to do, but I'm really proud of the work that the organization has done in the last few years. Our budget supports ongoing efforts to improve work performance and efficiencies, and it's demonstrated through continued evaluation of our work processes and staffing levels, beginning to measure our work performance and incorporate those measures into our budget process, continued racial equity work, developing business plans for our departments, and continuing to streamline and improve the effectiveness of our work. The next series of slides I'm just going to skip through. When Julie talks with you, Julie Wiseman will be up here and walk you through our budget book. All the details of the changes we've made are detailed in our budget book, and I'll have Julie actually walk you through where those are. So I won't go through all the details of every department budget's change. But I do want to highlight a couple initiatives and changes that are going on. We had planned a year and a half to start a process of community engagement around our recreation centers. Because of internal work we've been doing around some job realignment, that's taken us longer than we anticipated. So we're actually just beginning the process to do that recreation analysis, which will be called RecQuest. We're expecting early in 2015, the community engagement portion of that process will begin in early 2015. The board is also considering investments to particular operations center for employees and our equipment that works out of North, Northeast, and Southeast Minneapolis. We have some very antiquated facilities that our staff work out of, and most of our very expensive equipment is stored outside, and so the life of that equipment is shortened as a result of that. So we are looking at making some critical operation facility improvements. One of the things also that our board did in 2010 is they shifted $2 million out of our general operating budget to neighborhood capital. They put that in our CIP to try to start making some investments in our neighborhood parks. And we've actually been able to do some work in that. However, my budget recommends shifting $1 million of that dollars back into our operating budget. And I'll talk a little bit later about why I'm recommending that, but I want to point that out. As a result of that change, and in addition to getting significantly less dollars from the state in their bonding cycle last year, you will notice that our CIP has a number of significant changes. Our capital construction costs continue to rise. I'm sure you're also seeing that on the city side. And so really our 2015 to 2020 CIP, our capital improvements plan, reflects these changes. It includes minimal new projects and pushes playground reconstruction actually back 1 year.
Excuse me, Superintendent.
Yes.
Is that a impact only neighborhood parks, or how does that impact regional parks, especially around playgrounds?
Actually, it impacts both neighborhood and regional parks. We have $1 million less in our additional pay-as-you-go capital, which goes towards neighborhood parks. And we also have almost $2 million less from the state for our regional parks. So actually, both regional neighborhood parks have been impacted, and construction costs increases are across both neighborhood and regional parks. So all of those really impact all of our parks across the city. There are not a number of fee increases. There are some very specific market rate increases that we're recommending. And also, we have a sustainability fund and land acquisition fund, but we're not recommending to add any additional dollars to those funds. For those of you who've been on council for a while, one of the things that you've heard from me before is really stabilizing our equipment fund. Historically, our equipment fund supported a lot of activity, or enterprise fund, excuse me, supported a lot of activities that weren't true enterprise activities. Enterprise activities, as you know, from the city, are really designed to be business operations that are self-sustaining, both from an annual operating expense, but also to pay debt and depreciation. And we had a number of activities within our enterprise fund that really were not enterprise fund activities. So we are continuing to clean that up. We have two actually activities that are still in the enterprise fund. While they're not self-supporting today, my recommendation is that they stay in the enterprise fund until both of those activities stabilize. One is the sculpture garden, which historically, prior to the Guthrie moving downtown, was self-sustaining because of the revenue we generated from the parking structure. Both with the Guthrie moving and the change in the parking at that area, we now are operating at a significant deficit. But as you know, we received dollars from the state to do reconstruction, which will be beginning next summer. And we also received some money from the watershed district. And as part of that, we are in the process of working through a new agreement with the Walker in hopes that we will be able to actually develop a structure that will actually help to make it self-supporting. If that's not the case, then we will probably move the sculpture garden out of the enterprise fund. Also, winter recreation, with the work that we are doing at Worth Winter with the Lopet Foundation, because that is still being played out and has not come to full fruition. I'm leaving it an enterprise fund, but again, my hope is that with the redesign and the work that we're doing at Worth Winter, that winter recreation hopefully will be self-supporting also. Some of these details, again, will be in the budget. I won't go through those. I do, however, want to highlight golf in particular. The flooding that we received in the city in June, fortunately, it was predominantly on parkland. Just want you and the citizens to imagine that if that was not parkland, the impact to the city would have been incredible for the flooding that occurred in June. It did have significant impact, obviously, in our parks, but our parks can recover in ways that if there had been buildings, whether residential or commercial properties, would have had a significantly different kind of impact. So, and again, another value of parks is that they become stormwater retention places in severe storms. It did, however, impact two of our golf courses, Hiawatha and Meadowbrook Golf Course. Fortunately for Hiawatha, we were able to open part of it late in the summer. However, Meadowbrook remained closed the entire season. And to give you some understanding of the impact, that on a weekday, we generate anywhere between $6,000 and $7,000 a day in revenue from a golf course. And on weekends, we generate between $11,000 and $13,000 in revenue. So multiply that by 3-4 months of being closed. It has had significant financial impact on our golf operations. Fortunately, we received FEMA declaration, and we are working both with FEMA and the Watershed District in developing options for both of those golf courses. It's my expectation within the next couple months that we will actually begin a community engagement process. At this point, we have 3 options that we're looking at for both courses. It's my expectation that we just need to vet them a little bit further internally, but we will begin a public process to share that information and ultimately bring a recommendation to our board about how to move forward with our golf courses. I touched a little bit about our equipment and IT. Those are both internal service funds. We had historically underfunded both of those. We had actually in our equipment fund been using our capital reserves to balance our operating budget. And as a result of that, to give you some perspective, 44% of our entire fleet is past its life cycle. So we have put ourselves in a position where we have significant gaps in our capital needs for our equipment. IT, we had not made investments in our IT funds and activities, both hardware and software. So we're doing a lot of catch up so we get current. Again, for new council members, just to give you some perspective, last year, up until last year, all of our outlying facilities, of which we have 87 of them, they were operating with DSL lines. Think about how long it's been since you were operating with DSL. We finally have fiber optic connections to all of our outlying facilities, and we just did that last year. So that gives you a sense of the magnitude of how far behind we were with technology. Again, I'm not going to go over these. These are some details that you will see in your budget book. But fundamentally, the budget is built on trying to have sound financial management and fiscal responsibility, focus on commitment to excellent services, and maintaining really the extraordinary park system we have within the resources we have, focusing particularly on equity across the park system, including racial equity, and really trying to address the increased park attendance and usage, as well as increase in demand for enhanced programs and services. So those are the things we're juggling with. And I want to actually talk a little bit about, Julie, if you could hand this out. That's really the end of my presentation regarding the budget. Julie's going to walk you through some other details, but I want to talk a little bit. I know when I presented my budget to the mayor and issues that we were dealing with to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, I really spent a lot of time also talking about capital. And that's really what I want to talk about, is to give you an understanding of really the challenge we're facing on a capital side that has significant implications for our operating. As you all know, the Park Board is an asset-rich system. Our investments in our assets have not kept pace with our needs, and the downturn of the economy since 2003 further reduced the investments in our assets in our system. During the economic downturn, we also found a decrease in external funding streams. They became unpredictable and often resulted in significantly reduced funding to the Park Board. The shift of some of our operating dollars that was done in 2010, which became pay-as-you-go capital money, while necessary to make investments in our neighborhood park, it actually had a detrimental impact on meeting the organizational operating needs. I also want to give you an understanding of how significant our capital issues are. If you look solely at our neighborhood parks, we have an annual funding need of $13 million just for capital investments in our neighborhood parks. From 2000 through 2014, we analyzed both what we've spent and what we should have had. So between that 14-year period of time alone, we're $110 million behind where we should be in investing in our neighborhood parks. Yes?
Councilmember Glidden has a question.
Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Superintendent, and thank you also to Park Board President Liz Walensky for being here today. So I wanted to kind of pause on that number for a second, just so I can better understand it, and just so you know, we had passed out to us at the same time this report that you presented to the Park Board, and I'm looking at, there's a page in here with a lot of red, which I think means danger, and green, which means it's in good shape. But just for a and that is breaking out into different categories like athletic fields and buildings, what's the status or the needs within the parks. We use it, I just don't know what's the kind of measures that you use to determine where you're at, and so I just use a comparison just because it comes to my mind, not because it's apt to your business here with the neighborhood parks, which is our pavement condition index, which is a way that we look at the condition of roads, which is a place where we need capital investment. And it can tell us kind of where we're at on that trajectory. We can also get information from our staff that tells us, well, if you continue on this trajectory, then what happens? Is there anything comparable, and maybe that's just what this is, this is more, it just tells me you want to invest versus you don't think you've invested enough. That helps us understand what you get for $13 million
Yep.
a year?
And
Is this the premier? Is it good enough? Is it safe enough? You know, what do you kind of
Correct.
get for that investment?
It's a very good question, and not to, I'm going to answer your question and also ask for your indulgence a little bit as I go through my presentation, because I think I'll explain some of that to you. But if you look behind the page that you have, Councilmember Glidden, of red, you will see a very detailed spreadsheet that is park by park across the entire city, identifies every asset that we have in that park, and the units of that asset, what the cost was in 1999, what the replacement value was in 1999, what the replacement value is today. One of the challenges why we can't give you a PCI number, or a number similar to the PCI for pavement, is that because parks have so many different assets. Every park is different. Some park may have 2 playgrounds. Some park may not have a playground. Some park may have, trails, so that you can't compare parks in the way that you can look at a street because there's so much amount of asphalt. There's multiple assets, so giving you an index is you can't do it in parks because of the complexity of the number of assets that you have. But I will walk you through. So the detail of every park is covered in the spreadsheet that I provide you, but I'll also walk you through some additional information that will also give you a perspective of what you get for $13 million. Okay? So the next item, nice segue, Councilmember Glidden, is parkway paving and lighting. With the city in 2011, we actually did an analysis of our parkway conditions, and we as the city were substantially below the 75 PCI that we would hope to have. We actually did the math that in order for us to raise and sustain a PCI index of 75 by 2022, which at the time was 10 years, we'd need an annual investment of $5 million just in the parkways. Then we also have lighting along the parkway system, and our lighting system is 30 years or older. And again, in order to bring both the lighting, the poles, and our wiring up to the standard it should be by 2022, we'd need an additional investment of $2 million. Our regional park capital investments, again, those dollars from the Met Council and the state have become less predictable. Again, to give you some perspective, in 2012, we received 43% of the expected amount due to reduced state funding. And in 2014, we received 40% of what we should have received for our regional parks. Our golf facilities, we've just completed a complete analysis of our golf courses, and our funding gap, depending on what level investment we want to have, is anywhere from a minimum of $14.1 million to $34.5 million behind where it should be. As I mentioned to you, our equipment fleet, 44% of our equipment is past its life cycle. Currently, we have a $4.5 million gap in our fleet needs. And information technology, to bring the park board up to current standards, we'd need approximately $3 million. And then we need an annual ongoing investment of approximately $500,000 to stay current. So even if you conservatively looked at those numbers, we're more than $140 million behind meeting the park system capital needs. And that most significant need is within our neighborhood parks, and which really gets back to the point of what the board did in 2010, which was to try to put some money in capital in our neighborhood parks. But I'm going to show you the next, actually show you in a little bit what has resulted in doing that. And I just want to point out that I think that we are really, the work that we have done in the last 4 years to really look at, are we operating as efficiently as we can? Are there ways that we can save some money, improve our service delivery? I think we've done a significant amount of work in the last 4 years. But even with that, we are at a place where we are still unsustainable in terms of being able to cover our operating needs and the capital needs in our system. There's been obviously reductions in our resources for operating and maintenance needs. Our capital funding needs continue in every category of capital needs we have, and there is continued more and more demand and use in our park system. 3 years ago, we had annual visits of 18 million. We're at over 21.5 million visitors a year in our park system. So the demand continues to go up. As the community becomes more and more diverse, the needs and the services and the facilities that we need to provide change and need to be more diverse. So I feel like we're at a really critical point in terms of the park system being able to both operate and maintain what we have. So let me talk a little bit what's happened with our neighborhood capital. Because we are so far behind, we've gotten in the cycle of construction, deferring maintenance, and really only doing essential repairs, and then reconstructing again. As Councilmember Glidden pointed out, let me use the pavement system as an example. That is the most expensive way. I think that council has come to realize is also what you do in roads. That if you're simply reconstructing, deferring maintenance, and only doing critical repairs, you're spending the most significant amount of money on reconstruction, which is the most expensive. You're not doing preventive maintenance. And that's the cycle we're in at the Park Board. Our assets have very short life cycles because we're not doing preventive maintenance. Our operating funds are going to fix doing major fix-its instead of extending the asset's life cycle. And then we have to spend more money on capital investments. We get more complaints. We've increased our liability. And so my proposal is that we need to get out of that cycle. We need to have adequate funding levels for our capital investments. We need a dedicated and long-term funding for those capital needs. And we need a sophisticated asset management system with adequate funding to do preventive maintenance. And obviously a robust long-term rehabilitation funding. I often describe this to my staff. It's no different than at your house. If you own a home, yeah, you got to do capital stuff, but you also have to do preventive maintenance and rehab so that you're not spending a lot of money. In your packet, council members, you also have a 2-page sheet that should be the third page in your sheet that basically is a depiction of how we are serving people in our neighborhood parks, the number of parks we have. It just gives you some detailed descriptions of our park system. Also within that, in the middle section, it talks about the failing infrastructure and the changing needs within our neighborhood parks. And then it talks about the need, the annual investment need of $13 million for a year and how that number came up with. The back side of that same sheet, I think Councilmember Glidden, this will give you a perspective of what that $13 million will do. If you look at the slide that I have up on the board also in your handout, you'll see the top portion of that where the green boxes are. It gives a description of the assets we have in our neighborhood parks. And it has 2 lines. The first one is what's getting done with approximately $4 million we have today for our neighborhood parks. And what would get done if we had $13 million and also factored inflation. So you'll see a dramatic difference in the improvements and asset that we would be able to do if we had $13 million. A more detailed description is the bottom half of that. If you take, again, the section between the 2 gray lines, shows that basically it's an example of what we're able to do today annually through 2020 within our neighborhood parks. The bottom section shows of what increased projects would get done if we had the additional $13 million. So if you combined the section between the 2 gray lines in the middle, and then the section below, that's what we would get done, an example of what we would be able to get done with $13 million a year from 2015 through 2020. And then off to the right, it gives you the dollar amounts as well as the number of facilities that we would have improved within the system. And then the sheet
Councilmember Glidden, please. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Councilmember Glidden, please.
I had another question about this and these lists. And again, I'm just trying to kind of make sense of this information. And I will say, maybe this is powerful to kind of see it all spelled out like this. As someone who uses neighborhood parks a lot, and then Minneapolis residents, we use our parks. We love our parks. They're powerful assets and important assets in the city. But I also know from serving on the city council, we have a lot of capital needs that are critical to our city. We have a backup of needs on funding our streets, funding the infrastructure under our streets. And is there something that you have done to kind of prioritize these needs? Because what we're seeing here is kind of and maybe this is the best package that makes these parks usable and attractive. I don't know. I'm just curious how we look at the items here and how we think of what's the support system and how to prioritize that.
Very, very good question, Councilmember Glidden. The intent of this presentation and sharing this information with the Park Board, with you and the citizenry is not to prioritize, it's simply to demonstrate the need and the gap that we have. Our hope is that this is the beginning of a public process where we will actually engage the community to say, what do you want to do about this and how do we prioritize? Mostly what our intent is tonight, or this afternoon, is to demonstrate and show you the gap that we have within our neighborhood parks in particular.
Okay. Councilmember Connell, please.
Thank you, Chairman Quincy. Thank you, Superintendent Miller, for being here. I just want to make sure I understand how to read this graph that starts on page, well, it's basically after this colorful sheet. So it's the list of all the parks, and then up at the top you have the park name, the element, the units, the 1999 unit cost, the total replacement value, the total 1999 replacement value, and then the 2014 replacement value using the Turner Building Cost Index. So if you could just kind of walk through that just briefly and explain each one of those so that I don't make assumptions about what those things stand for.
Okay, so let's start with, let me just take Armitage Park, the baseball field. So first of all, Armitage Park, it lists every single asset we have in the park, outside of the grass, obviously. But if we have trails, if we have, actually, we have trails, we have baseball fields, so it identifies every single asset within that park today. So it lists all of those in alphabetical order, which is the element. So we have one baseball field, we have one bike rack, we have 7 bleachers, we have one drinking fountain, and so on. The next column is the units, which identifies how many of those assets we have. So for example, in the paths, we have 15,799 feet of pathway in Armitage Park. We have 3 picnic tables. We have a recreation center of 7,097 square feet. Just to give you that, that's what that is. The reason you have the 19.9 numbers in here is that was the first time we actually we looked at all of our neighborhood parks, all the assets in it. So that's, we have that that's why we have the 1999 unit cost. Then at that same time, we looked at the replacement value of that in $1999. So again, it's the same number in most cases as the unit cost, but if we have multiple units, it's multiplied by that unit. So for example, if you take our, let's take paths, for example. We have 15,799 linear feet of pathways. The unit cost at that time was $3 per linear foot. You multiply $3 times 15,799, and the replacement cost at that time was $39,498. Then the final column is what the replacement cost is today, which is $59,708. So it quantifies the value of all the assets we have in our park and the replacement cost of those assets.
And for the number under the total replacement in 2014, is that increase in cost, because I'm seeing that a lot of them are increases, is that based just on inflation or is there other?
It's based using the Turner Building Cost Index, which is a national standard for calculating costs for buildings and assets, which factors in inflation, other factors, construction costs, equipment, material costs.
Okay. And then as we're looking at the budget for that you're proposing this year, can you explain a little bit about how the racial equity analysis is being applied to that budget in terms of prioritization of park improvements? For example, I get a lot of resident concerns about the quality of the equipment in Powderhorn Park, but then if I bike to Lake of the Isles or if I bike to kind of the river parks, there's really nice brand new equipment. So I'm just wondering what that cycle looks like and when parks are slated for improvements.
Would you mind letting me finish this presentation, then I can get to that? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So let me actually get to this next sheet, which is actually in your packet and up on the board. And actually on the PowerPoint or what's on the slide, the page is divided in half because we couldn't fit it all. And let me just explain to you this. So this asset investment slash need snapshot, let me walk you through it. It takes the different kinds of assets that we have, from athletic fields to buildings to recreation centers to off-leash recreation areas to site furnishing, skate parks, and so on, down to wading pools. And what is in green is the funds that the park board has invested from 2000 to 2014. And that's the money that has been spent. That's the dark green. The light green are projected investments based on our CIP from 2015 through 2019, based on the board-approved 2014 to 2019 CIP. And what is in red is the funding gap, or what should have been invested by 2019. And then the total funding gap is off on the right for each of those columns. So you'll see that for each category, there are variations on what our gap is, both percentage as well as dollar amount. So that we have if you look through 2019 based on what we've spent through 2014 today and what is in our CIP through 2019, it shows the gap that we have. And then obviously then the other piece you have is the detailed, which I have already walked you through. So to answer your question, Councilmember Cano, one of the challenges comparing, for example, Lake of the Isles to Powderhorn is that they are two different kinds of parks. Powderhorn is a neighborhood park. Lake of the Isles is a regional park. Neighborhood parks, part of the challenge, I think if you looked at Powderhorn compared to other neighborhood parks, it's actually in similar shape as other neighborhood parks. The only funding sources we have for neighborhood parks is general fund dollars or net debt bonding. We have no other source of revenue to do investments in our neighborhood parks. And that is part of my point in this presentation is all of our neighborhood parks are woefully behind in terms of the investments that should have been made in those parks. Lake of the Isles is a regional park. Minnehaha Falls is a regional park. North Mississippi is a regional park. Nokomis is a regional park. Regional parks have multiple assets and multiple opportunities for funding sources. In fact, if you go to the budget book, back to our CIP, on page 128, you'll actually see a chart that depicts the different funding sources and availability for funding sources in our regional parks and our neighborhood parks. So one of the major challenges we have is our regional parks. We've been much more successful and across the state in having additional resources and dollars for regional parks compared to neighborhood parks. So I think comparing Lake of the Isles to Powderhorn is really, because they're two different kinds of parks and the funding sources for them are very different, they're not a good comparison. But I think if you looked at other neighborhood parks, you would see that many of them are in the similar condition as Powderhorn.
Yeah, I'd love to look at this issue further out of this meeting. I will clarify that the specific area I'm referencing is a smallish park. I took a picture of it, but I don't remember the name, but it's not actually connected or adjacent to the lake. It's nearby. So I'm not sure what the status of that park would be. It's too small to be a regional park, I think, but I'll follow up with you afterwards.
Councilmember Johnson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know if it makes sense to bring this up now or ask the question now, but I'm sure there's been more history on this as well, but I'm wondering, the park police are more than $5 million of the parks budget. I think there's been conversations in the past about having MPD fulfill some of those functions, similar to how we have partnerships with the schools or what have you. Why is there a separate park police force?
Very, very good question. And I have had conversations with both the current chief and the previous chief about that very issue, and all three of us are in agreement that the level of service that our parks would get if we were part of the city police department, not have our own separate police department, would be dramatically different. And also philosophically, park police are very different from city police. City police respond to calls, 911 calls, enforcement. They go in, deal with the situation, get out, go to another location where they're are reports of crime or concerns about safety. Park police do that work, but more as important, they are ambassadors for the park to keep the park safe. If you think about parks and communities, that if parks were not safe, people would not go to those parks. The safety of that park and that park space is utterly important for them to be used and be havens for people, particularly youth, to go and families to go and spend time in those parks. And so our park police do a lot of time spending time in the parks, establishing relationships with the staff, particularly our recreation staff, as well as youth in those neighborhoods, to understand what's going on, to actually do a lot of preventative work that city police officers simply don't have the time to do. To give you a perspective, the park system owns 15% of the land in the city, and yet we have less than 2% of the crime in our parks. And I think that's a direct correlation or reflection to the preventative work our police officers do in parks.
Councilmember Yang has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Superintendent Miller, in terms of, one of the points that was listed that the MPRB is more than $140 million behind in meeting the park system's capital needs. How are you guys going to catch up?
It's a really good question. I'm working with our commissioners to actually look at different strategies to figure out how we're going to do that. It's a real problem. It's a major issue. If you think about, while the roads are major, have a major infrastructure need in the city, most cities, things like their water system, sewer system, that is a comparable asset-rich system, but that is based on fees that pay for the investments in those structures. In park systems across this country, they do not have that same revenue stream unless there is a dedicated millage or some other funding stream that's provided to actually invest in our neighborhood parks. And that is a major challenge that we have to face.
Okay, and
I don't have an answer for you. My intent today really is, and as part of this budget cycle, is raise this issue and raise the awareness of the issue that we have.
Okay, and I have another question. At the city, I think we've struggled with this a bit, and I'm wondering, what do you mean when you talk about continuing to focus on equity across park systems, including racial equity? What does that mean to the park board?
For example, more broadly, we have what's called an IDEA project. Stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access. We have issues around ADA compliance, and I think you all know that well, you may not be aware, but we are required to have an ADA transition plan to ensure that there is a plan for ADA access across the park system. So we're in the process of actually developing an ADA transition plan, which we're required by law to do. And then obviously we have to figure out how to fund that. We have gender identity issues around whether it's registering for a program, using restrooms, all of those issues. So we're looking at that. Those issues. We're looking at issues of diversity, making sure that we have a workforce that represents the community in which we work. Most of us as human beings spend time with people who are like us. And so if we do not have staff, for example, in our parks, at our recreation centers, that look like the people that we're serving, people in the community won't come to that rec center or won't come to that program. So we've done a lot of work really looking at our employment practices, looking at outreach to get a diverse workforce. And I'm very proud of the fact that we've made significant strides in the last few years to actually increase the diversity of our workforce, particularly at the upper management and executive level. Then there's issues, obviously, with racial equity in terms of where do our dollars get spent. I'm also very proud that the investments this board has made in the last 3 or 4 years, particularly in North Minneapolis, in the Phillips and East Phillips neighborhood, that we are making conscious choices and decisions to spend money in those areas of town. We have also a pilot project that we're working on, looking at. I can't publicly talk about it right now, but we're looking at a project for next year that actually looks at the entire, both from community engagement, more intentional community engagement that ensures that we're hearing all of the voices around that particular park in that neighborhood, and then looking at the investments in that particular park that meet the racial equity needs of people who surround that park. So I hope that gives you some perspective of how we're trying to address those issues.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, at Farview Park, the new field that was, I guess, somewhat funded by the Ripken Foundation. I mean, I know there was some controversy around the turf field and all that stuff, but I mean, every time I drive by there, I mean, it is packed with people, and usually, it was maybe somewhat intended to be a baseball field / football field, but a lot of people are playing soccer on there, and I mean, I think that's one of the maybe shortcomings of, some of the parks is we just don't have enough soccer fields to, meet the needs of certain people there as well, so.
Absolutely, and Farview is a perfect example, Councilmember Yang, of how making that kind of investment has really changed that neighborhood and how youth and adults in that neighborhood interact. I talk to our staff often, and they've said that, prior to that field being in, different groups would use it at different times and there were conflicts, and now that that field is in, they actually play together and interact in ways that they weren't prior to that field being put in.
I guess I'd like to just add a little something. As we were talking to the Youth Coordinating Board earlier this afternoon, we also talked about the youth cabinet work that's going on at the city, where our city departments are all meeting. One of the things that came out of that is that we felt we needed a youth asset inventory. We wanted to find out all the places and amenities that attracted or served youth at various levels throughout the city. So we used our planning department to do this. This is through CPED, where we're trying to identify and then work with the Youth Coordinating Board on coming up with matching programs. So the Youth Coordinating Board is one of those great opportunities for the county and the parks and the schools and the city all to work together to do this. A lot of it is very collaborative, but just coming up with a map to find out where do we have our assets, where are our resources, and where are we short them, where should we put some. It really affects property values throughout the city. We know that if there's a park within a few blocks of a house, it has more value than if you're further away from one. So it helps identify the gaps as well as identify the very strengths of our city. So I just like to always point out how Youth Coordinating Board, our own city departments work with the planning department and the park board folks on how to make sure we're serving people equitably. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see Council President had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have to admit, I missed the Youth Coordinating Board presentation, but I think they did that work already. I'll go dig up the map. I've been around here too long, I think. You see stuff come around and come around. And that actually goes to kind of my question. I think we identify stuff very well, but it takes action, it takes money to make the difference. And I really want to say, for us in North Minneapolis, I want to thank you for the attention and that investment that's happened in our community, and it really does make a difference. And when I count all of the projects that we've been involved in, and a number of them are multiple agencies involved, Victor Memorial Drive, but Weber Park, where we've actually changed the boundary of North Mississippi Park to help fund some of the work that's going on there. That's going to be a fantastic project. But it does take action, not just identification.
Absolutely.
And I thank you for the work. And the other thing I want to say, I just this last week, driving through our park system, and Theodore Wirth was where I was, and Theodore Wirth Parkway, the care that our foresters take in preserving our urban forest and the care that they take in laying it out when they put new things in is just a phenomenal asset for our community. And we're so blessed to have that great department in your agency that I think people don't always think about, but what a difference they make to Minneapolis. So thank you.
Thank you.
We also have a comment or a question from Councilmember Cano.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the comment you mentioned regarding the HR racial equity hiring initiatives. Is there a part in the budget that addresses kind of bringing those skills on board, whether it's through outside support or whether it's in-house initiatives or programs that are going to help with that? I know we as a city are doing it too, and it's
Yes, we do. It's in our HR budget.
Okay, What specifically?
We are part of actually the racial equity work with the city. We're part of the alliance. We are also doing cultural awareness training for our staff. We have it across, it's not just in our HR budget, but I would say within the employment piece and within the cultural awareness training, that's actually in our community outreach department, and the alliance that is budgeted in our HR department. But we have other facets of work that we're doing across the organization, such as in recreation and planning, around community engagement when we do planning projects, those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That partially answers one of my questions, was how do you have some best practices that you've learned that we could start to learn from? I'm curious, could you comment on metrics you have in place to ensure successful delivery of things on your contracts?
It's actually a very good question. One of the things that I would have to say that we are not as far along as I wish we were, and that's metrics. We've actually identified organization-wide metrics, but we are not collecting the data yet. I'm actually interviewing tomorrow for a deputy superintendent position, of which, when that position's filled, that's going to be a major initiative that person needs to get going, is actually collecting data for our performance measures, not only organization-wide, but working with our staff to actually develop performance measures within each department so that we're starting to measure the success of the work and where we're spending our resources.
Thank you.
I think we're ready to proceed as you are.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Julie Wiseman, and she'll walk you through the details of our budget.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Wiseman.
Good afternoon, council members, Chair Quincy. Each of you should have received Superintendent's 2015 recommended budget. There are several tabs in the budget book, and my presentation will just go right along with the tabs. All of the documentation that was handed out to the board on October 22nd, as well as this budget book, is available online at the minneapolisparks.org website /budget. The first section of the budget book is the budget message. And if you turn to page 6, it begins the budget highlights. And that is where you will find all of the detailed information that the superintendent referred to in her presentation about the factors that impacted the creation of this budget, and then the changes that were that the superintendent is recommending throughout the divisions and the departments within the Minneapolis Park Board. The next section of the budget book is the strategic direction, and that was adopted by our board on June 4th of 2014 this year, and really drives the department goals and performance measures that we have within our departments. So I put this as an example. You will find throughout the budget book and all the divisions that there are department goals. And the goals are directly tied to the strategic directions, and it has a box that will identify which strategic direction that particular goal applies to. The next section of the budget book is background information, and it just includes a map with the commissioner districts, as well as an organization chart for the park board, and then some of the descriptions of the funds that the park board has. Then we start getting into the financial information of the superintendent's recommended budget book. The first section is property taxes and local government aid. The superintendent's recommended budget is based on a 4.9% maximum property tax levy that was approved by our board and then set by the Board of Estimate and Taxation. The MPRB general operating maximum is set at $50.6 million, a 4% increase. And then you see the tree preservation and reforestation levy, which makes up the other 0.9% of the increase that that is included in this recommended budget. If you look at the city tax as a whole, the park board represents 17.55% of the city tax. If you look at a total tax bill for a city of Minneapolis resident, which includes school board, county, and other taxing jurisdictions, as well as the city and park board, we are 8 cents on every dollar that is paid in the city of Minneapolis for property taxes. Local government aid. As you can see on this chart, local government aid had some significant decreases between 2006 and 2012, and then it stabilized, and now it is starting to increase. We are expecting to receive $9.1 million in 2015. Again, that's a slight increase over 2014, but it's still well below the levels that we used to receive. The next section of the budget book is our general fund. On the revenue side of the general fund, we continue to be heavily dependent on property taxes, where 72.6% of our budget comes from this single source. Property taxes increased by the 4% maximum, and then you'll see the slight increase in local government aid, and then you'll see another slight increase in fees, fines, and other revenues, as we talked a little bit about rate increases, market rate increases, and then also an expansion of Rec Plus sites. On the expenditures by major categories, wages and fringe make up 68.2% of the general fund budget. We're showing an increase of 4.3% in wages and fringe, and that is due to the increase in full-time employees, also an increase to part-time hours, union negotiated contracts, pension adjustments, the minimum wage increase, and then the impact of the Affordable Health Care Act. Operating increases include the inflationary adjustments, but also expanded regional maintenance, Loring Pond Cattail Management Program, some costs associated with the operation at the Weber Natural Filtration Pool, and then the equipment and ITS rate increases that the superintendent referred to as a continuation of shoring up our internal service funds rate models. And then you'll see on the capital line where we have the decrease of $1 million as a reduction in the pay-as-you-go capital, shifting that $1 million back into the operations. If you look at the expenditures by division, you'll see that there's increases pretty much throughout each of the areas of the park board. Within the superintendent's office, we have some increases that she referred to in the communications and marketing and police. And then in the deputy superintendent's office, there's some increases recommended in the human resources department. In environmental stewardship, you'll see the increases of $1.5 million, and that includes some additional staffing, as well as increases in the regional maintenance funds. Again, the Loring Pond Cattails. We're adding a trades apprenticeship program, the Weber Natural Filtration Pond, environmental management part-time staffing for gardens and educational programming. In recreation, we are adding an additional day of open swim at Lake Nokomis, a pop-up park, programming associated with the Weber Natural Filtration Pool, and then Rec Plus programming, enhanced summer camps, freedom schools, and then an addition of a therapeutic recreation position. The next section of the budget book is the special revenue funds area. Special revenue funds account for resources that are dedicated for specific purposes. We have two special revenue funds, the park grant and dedicated revenue fund, and then the tree preservation and reforestation fund. So the separate levy for the tree preservation and reforestation fund is kept in a separate fund and accounted for separately. And again, you see those, these two areas with the balance by unit. And then I'll just highlight for you, because I've had a couple of questions. The park dedication fee is actually kept in the special revenue fund as well, and it's part of that park grant and dedicated revenue. And at this point, we are collecting the park dedication fees. There are no plans for the distribution of those fees, as we're just starting to receive those, started in January of 2014, and those funds need to build up prior to being programmed and used for any specific project. The next area is the enterprise funds. Again, the enterprise funds are self-supporting areas of the park board, and we are continuing to look at all the functions that are within this area. You will notice on this chart that we have both decreases in revenues and expenditures recommended for 2015, some pretty significant decreases, and of course those are directly related to the closing of both Meadowbrook and Hiawatha golf courses. And then the other thing that I would like to point out on this chart is that you will see in 2015 in this recommended budget, improvements have been set at 0. This will be updated once the long-term strategies are made for each golf course. It's a little bit too early with working through the damages that occurred during the flooding and the options and what will happen through working with FEMA and the other agencies in getting those golf courses back operational. And we will be bringing those back to the board in 2015 and establishing those appropriations at that time when those costs are more known. And then the other thing that I'll point out is the transfers to debt service, the 1.2 million. That's the debt service associated with the Neiman Sports Complex, as well as debt service now associated with the Parade Ice Garden improvements. And then the transfer to the general fund, you'll see that that is now at 0 for 2015, as we've discontinued that support out of this fund. If you look by operating income by unit, our recommended budget for 2015 is reflecting losses in several areas. Again, the superintendent talked about the sculpture garden and winter recreation, which are both areas that are still under development. But also you'll see that we are recommending, or we're expecting to have a loss in our golf operations of just under $1 million due to the closing of those 2 golf courses as they have construction in 2015. The next section of the budget book is the internal service funds. And again, our internal service funds are our equipment operations, information technology services, and then our self-insurance. You'll see the major increase in this fund this year is in equipment rental. And again, we have phased in improvements in our rate models over the last several years in our equipment operations. We worked really hard on the operational side and phased in some increases for operations over the last 3 years. And now we have done a lot of work on the actual capital needs of that fund. And we have recommended an increase in the equipment replacement of a little over $500,000. And that will continue on for the next 5 years to catch us back up to an optimal equipment replacement program. So you see that increase this year. And then again, we have the 3 areas of that are in the internal service funds. The self-insurance fund, we're showing a little bit of a deficit this year. We're working on some old catch-up of some workers' comp claims, which we're considering kind of more one-time things. And we have fund balance reserve in that area that is in excess of the requirements, and so we're recommending to use some of that reserve to do this work that we're expecting to do in 2015. Finally, our personnel summary. My numbers are just slightly different than what the superintendent talked about earlier. I used a different time frame, but just to give you a sense, between 2006, when we had 582 employees, down to 2012, where we had our lowest number of 465 full-time employees, we really lost 117 full-time positions, or 20% of our workforce. Since 2012, we have been able to slowly increase our workforce, and between 2012 and the recommended budget in 2015, we increased our workforce by 28 full-time positions. On the capital project section of the budget book, this is the area for neighborhood parks, where in 2015, we're recommending $5 million to the neighborhood park capital program. And then for regional funding, these are the three areas of funding for regional parks in 2015, and it's recommended $6.45 million.
Ms. Wiseman, could you go back one slide, please? And the funding source of this is the Minneapolis CLIC program. Is that correct, or is that a different levy?
The net debt bonding is the CLIC program, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to bring your attention to pages, starting pages 133 in your budget book, and it has the 2015 to 2020 recommended capital improvement program. You're going to see a lot of numbers in red on this chart. Those are the changes that have had to be made to the capital program, or the recommended changes to the capital program, based on the three things that the superintendent talked about. Based on shifting $1 million out of the capital program back into operations, based on increasing all the project costs for the inflation in capital construction, and then also the decreases that we now know from the state of Minnesota for our regional system. So there's a lot of red on these next several pages. Also on the Park Board website, there is a recommended 2015 to 2020 capital improvement program spreadsheet that's bigger than this one, and it has a lot of explanation off to the side. So if you're looking at a particular area and you are wanting a little more detail, I would refer to that larger spreadsheet that is on our website. So finally, for us, our budget process is slightly different than the City of Minneapolis budget process. On November 5th, we are going to be taking public comment on the superintendent's recommended 2015 budget during our Administration and Finance Committee meeting of the board. We also will have commissioner review and comment at that time in the committee setting. On November 19th, our full board then will receive public comment on the superintendent's recommended budget and have an opportunity to provide review and comment to the superintendent. On December 3rd, our Administration and Finance Committee will approve the Park Board's 2015 annual budget in preparation for our meeting here at City Hall on December 10th, which will include the Truth and Taxation hearing, as well as the Park Board adopting our Park Board tax levy, as well as the adoption of the 2015 annual budget. That completes my presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Wiseman, for sharing the detailed recommended budget with us and going over the highlights of that. Of course, Superintendent Miller, thank you for joining us and giving the great detail, especially the issues around the neighborhood parks. Councilmember Palmisano has a question. I don't know if it's from Ms. Wiseman or from Ms. Miller.
I'm not sure either.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I think for Ms. Weissman, your park board recently pulled $520,000 from reserves related to Southwest LRT studies and legal fees. Maybe it's for you, Jane. If you pursue litigation, what is your estimate for legal fees? And I don't see it represented in any of these categories, so can you tell me where these funds will come from?
Councilmember Palmisano and other council members, we did take $500,000 out of fund reserve. Actually, it was not for legal fees. It was to fund doing a detailed engineering analysis of the channel and the corridor along the Kenilworth Trail that we had requested the Met Council to do, that they are actually required as part of 4F legislation. And they have done some engineering analysis, but not to the detail that all of the bridges and other alternatives have been looked at. And because they had chosen not to do it, from the perspective, if we waited until details were further along with that project, it would be too late. And so our board, based on advice from legal counsel, gave us the authority to spend up to $500,000 for analyzing a tunnel underneath the channel. Until we have that detailed engineering analysis back, we do not know what the next step of the board will be. And so whether or not there is any legal action is premature at this point in time for us to even know whether that is something we will pursue.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if one more question, Ms. Miller, do you anticipate being reimbursed for that study at any point in time by Met Council or otherwise?
I can hope you can appreciate, Councilmember Palmisano, until we have the detailed engineering analysis that will tell us whether doing the tunnel, well, first of all, the Met Council has told us that it is feasible engineering-wise to do it. The detailed engineering analysis will tell us the impact of that tunnel. And that is what is crucial in order for our board to say that what is proposed currently is the least impactful within that park setting, which is a requirement of 4F legislation. Our board, by legal authority, has to give any 4F approval, any project that goes through parkland. We do that all of the time. And that happens after municipal consent is given. And until our board has the information they need to know whether the tunnel under the channel or the bridge that is proposed has the least impact, they will not be able to make any decisions. And part of what comes out of the analysis will determine our next steps, both with talking with the Met Council, whether we will sue, whether we will get reimbursed for those costs. Those are all questions that we have, but we won't know the answers to those until we have the analysis completed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Not seeing any further questions. So again, thank you for your presentation and sharing that information with us. Thank you, President Walensky, for joining us. And our next scheduled budget hearing is on Thursday, October 30th from 10 to 3, where we'll be taking up significant department budget hearings on Public Works Department and the Police Department. So until then, we are adjourned. We need to take the official action just not by vote, but to receive and file these reports, and look forward to seeing everybody again on the 30th. Thank you. We're adjourned.